OK. Welcome back. Bienvenue de retour. Donc, cette deuxième séance, the second session will be on, we'll get into the nitty-gritty digital twins and the synergies with openBIM principles. The idea is to start looking at, digital twins are rapidly emerging as the next logical step in the evolution of BIM. And that's what they say. And what does that mean? How does that actually occur? So we'll have a series of presentations on this topic. Our first presenter is Greg Schleusner from AECO, Director of Design Technology, and also co-chair of the International Technical Room. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, everyone. We'll start with how not to do a presentation. So when Eric asked me to do this presentation a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, get that, I started with an idiom, and an idiom backwards from the actual idiom. The actual idiom that I'm referring to in my presentation is this thing of which is called last resort, the last choice, and this is relating to the topic we have today. The last choice in our industry often is open standards. So the point of making an idiom in reverse was to figure out how do you make it the first choice. But unfortunately, to an international conference, you have to explain idioms, and you should never start a presentation with idioms. So as an example, Greg, who is a noun, should be the last resort to introduce a crowd of people to this topic. I'm way too technical most of the time, like was said. There's no spelling errors, I don't think, in there. But I do co-lead the technical room, but actually my job at HOK is sort of a nice mix because my responsibilities are sort of having to translate things. So now that we know what not to do with a presentation, and this is why, because I presented this slide yesterday to a group of people. It had animations at the time, so I'm not going to walk you through it, but this is the sort of noise I'm going to try to keep away from you in this context. But again, don't start with idioms. Okay, so open is first resort. So the point of this phrase, and this is the title of the presentation is listed on the agenda, is how do you actually make this an attractive view of the world versus what we often see today as proprietary solutions and things like that. And it really comes down to, sorry, I forgot my order of my slides and I should look at the preview. Before I get into that, I'll describe a little bit more about my job. So I mentioned I'm the co-chair of the technical room, but in HOK I sort of work on big projects. So I live in New York. The last two projects I worked on previously was a LaGuardia airport renovation, and I have the wonderful experience to get started. I'm not no longer attached, but with the center block rehabilitation. And so on those kind of projects and why it relates to this particular topic is what I do is, this is a project that's very complex, has tons of goals. For those of you who don't know, this is the Canadian Parliament building in Ottawa, which is going a sort of very large renovation. And the role I serve is to sort of help understand how do you set a plan out to make whatever the goals are successful. And this is the view of the world I come from when it comes to sort of applying technology, applying open standards. So let's talk about first resort. And from my perspective, I work on a design firm. I very much look at this as the way you get adoption of open standards in a sort of digital twin context definitely is looking at the places of value and trying to sort of build those out with digital workflows. So the one I've not spent a ton of time talking about, and I'm not one for being dogmatic about terminology, but the term that goes along often with digital twins that you see in some places is this term called digital thread. These are much better animations, and there we go, where the string will go around things, so I'm going to have to talk to those things. But this term actually goes to the idea that, okay, if you want to stitch together some information, you want to have a digital twin, what you actually had to do to make this really operate as a data set that's continuous is stitch together that information. So as you're doing conceptualization, planning, I need to know what the drivers of deciding to build a building, renovate a building, infrastructure, what have you. If you're going to go into sort of the design phase, that information needs to be part of this as well, into construction, and then finally into operations. That clock, actually in my sketches, went all the way so nice and slowly. But so the point here is when you sort of look at this problem and you want to make open as sort of the first resort, you sort of, at least from my perspective, this is the problem to tackle. And it's a hard problem because there's all kinds of issues in solving this. Many of you that maybe touch the digital twin world, most of your effort is probably spent on data collection. So go ahead here, one more. So the point of this whole thing is being able to sort of make this continuous loop into the process. So let's just talk about what a digital thread is. So I like to have somebody else's definition I can point to so I don't have to invent one myself. So this comes out of some US Air Force work in 2013. It's been advanced. You'll run across a term called golden thread in the UK, which came out of the Grenfell fire report, and which is a similar concept, I think. And then they also coined the term golden key, which is basically ways to identify information as it flows through a process. So the sort of way I'm addressing this, and this is very much work in progress research, it's not a solved problem, but I'm looking at this from a design to construction perspective because this is the world I live in. But I think fundamentally it's an important aspect of this sort of long-term view of, again, how do you make open standards the first choice. And I think the only way you're really going to get there is if you can start very early and make this sort of continuous process. So the way you could describe this as the alert here is basically something downstream in our process is out of date or needs to be changed. I mean, you can find many examples in the construction industry where you design something, the product availability, especially during COVID, I need to substitute a product, I need to add, make a revision because I can't get something in time. So this idea that by making this digital thread, and it's a very abstract concept, but if each one of these little boxes represented a decision point that is represented in data, so let's say, all the way in the left, that's a program or a requirement or a specification, and then you're migrating into, well, I know the requirements, so now I can pick materials, pick finishes, or pick a structural system that meets those things. If I can't go back when I get to this end state and have my data inform me that I at least have to revisit that step because that's actually the place that this decision was made, and trace through those things. If you can't do that manually, because if you imagine how this is done today, it's very smart people and very hard-working people have to trace back all through those processes through meeting notes or logs or all these things. If you can't do that, you can't possibly sort of know when to do this. And so the point is that you could sort of make a circular loop within this process between design and construction. So, but this is just a microcosm, obviously, of the whole industry. So if we look, you know, where I've started to look at this is a word salad. It's a good, I do like this term. Basically, this was, when I started doing this effort, just started with this statement, you know, someone wants to change this to that, can we? And this is kind of the question, I think, as you're looking ahead to make a digital twin that it's actually can react to change, we need to be able to understand how this information comes together. So just to give you the cliff notes here, the top part is, you know, just walking through all the steps, and I'm just giving a number to point out the different pieces of information that you might have to connect. it appears in a spec or a drawing, it shows up in a material list, or you show something in a rendering. But fundamentally, these things sort of form a chain of decisions. Some of them, sort of human-driven, some of them code-driven, because then at the same time you want to be able to check against code, local requirements, and all these things. And if you sort of think hard about this problem, sorry, I'm going to get myself a drink of water. If you think hard about this problem, this is a very difficult concept to manage today. Sorry about that. So this is the starting point for me. So if we go back to looking at this in a sort of a broader context, we have the pieces of this sort of chain of information or thread of information that you want to connect together, that you want to sort of make continuous, and not just continuous in one process, but continuous as the life of a piece of infrastructure or facility. So we've gotten through the sort of planning, design into construction. If we go to operations, the building or facility or infrastructure is running for some time. Invariably, you're going to sort of need to modernize, update, change, depending on the building type. Some of the projects we work on, you modify them the day they open, because in a healthcare scenario or an airport scenario, there's always new tenants and so forth. So what you have is a brand new chain of information, and what you're actually trying to do is sort of keep the beginning part, because the reasons you made these decisions and the connective tissue to sort of get to, oh, these are the set of requirements that got me to where I am today. They still want to be able to be connected to this sort of secondary chain. So now you have I don't know, analogies are good, but it's always difficult. But if you thought about these as chains of DNA you wanted to put together, but ultimately this sort of arrow that's snaking around here really is the thing that, sort of we need to think about how to construct. Very, what's the word for this? Hard to describe technically at this point, because we can do it with a lot of effort, but it's not easy. So the point of me doing the work I'm doing today, and sort of the context of this talk, is this is the direction I'm focusing in my efforts when it comes to some of the work within Building Smart, and how we start to even think about how IFC itself can support digital twins and doing these sort of things. So it probably will result in a sort of different approach to platforms and tools, because it requires that we don't have this sort of cloud of different information being in so many different places, but we actually have a way to sort of make it useful for people while they're making decisions to put it together. I mean, again, in the context of a digital twin, there's a lot of effort today that goes into the construction of whatever that data set wants to be after the fact. I think, at least from my perspective, the goal should be that is coming together sort of as you're doing it. So the approach I take for all these things, and this is very much why I'm sort of on the technical side of the room, or the world, if you will, is to sort of prove through prototyping. So this is the work maybe not we're doing in Building Smart particularly, but I do personally and within the context of HOK. And there's this sort of long-term view that, the industry does certainly understand, we have 3D data, we have more semantically rich stuff, and the most of this information is the semantically rich stuff connected to model information potentially. But we often treat them as little slices of information, because that's how our industry works, where we have an expert in energy, carbon life cycle, and all those things might have a kernel of connection to things like material information, or the carbon, the concrete, and the finished material are all the same thing, but they're all disconnected by the way people work. So how this actually gets stitched together is a sort of important thing, and it will definitely take a change in approach in how applications work, to sort of not think about individual users' needs, but this sort of chain of information. So this is very much a TBD, at least from my perspective, because it's an unproven problem, but it's the right one to look at, especially if we want to make information, like I said, have this connectivity through its life, but connectivity that doesn't have to be driven by a human, because in the future, these digital twins really want to be able to react to requirements that came 50 years ago. And if you ever want a system exactly like that, this is the kind of effort we have to make. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Very thought-provoking, and I think sort of a key in, as we think about how do we, enable these ecosystems and actually enable these technologies, weaving that digital thread. And definitely, Greg, you were not my last resort. I thought of you first, so I think that was great. Our next presenter is the president of VDCO Tech, and will come and talk about digital twins. Thank you, Cindy Baldwin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't know how I keep getting asked back to conferences, because usually I'm a little controversial. I'm going to try to behave today, but I cannot guarantee that. So I'm going to talk to you about digital twins in my perspective. So just real quick, how many small businesses are here? Yay. Okay, small businesses, let's start to quantify that. Anything under $1 million? Ooh. Anything under $2 million? Okay, that's small. Anything under $3 million? Okay, anything under $10 million? Anything under $50 million? The rest of you guys are all big dogs. You're either representing government, you're representing big agencies, HOK, HDR. I'm little. I'm not even probably in the dog arena when it comes to it. I am a small business, and I'm going to talk to you about digital twins. And when you talk about digital twins, I am a muddy boot BIMer. I'm a licensed general contractor. I am a small business. I am 100% female-owned, and I represent and sit on a lot of committees because I simplify things. And I'm not faking it. I just dumb it down, because I'm the one that has to come into your owners and say, I have an HOK, I have an HDR, I have an AECOM, I have a Balfour, I have a Turner, I have a DPR, all the big guys. And the owners struggle to say, but they all come in and they do it differently. And then what happens to all the trades and all the small businesses that you need to have on your project? Because guess what? I'm where it breaks. I am actually representing the doers, the people, the blue-collar workers that are on your projects. And growing up in the field of construction, I realized there needed to be a company. I could drive a backhoe. My dad had to say, before I could drive a car, I had to drive a backhoe. So I needed to be able to see. I didn't always want to do that in the field. So blending technology with real-world practices is where we kind of found our niche. And we are specialists. We do a lot of owner rep work. And the reason I like Building Smart International and the Building Smart organization, I currently chair the Building Smart USA Airport Room, by no means the airport expert. But I, again, am the ones that kind of can simplify and talk about where we are today. And I like to describe Building Smart International as those doctors that come in. My sister just had a brain injury, massive brain injury. Doctor came in, thank God you saved our lives. You have a bleed and you have a cranio something with a fistula something. And my sister and I cried and hugged the doctor and said, thank you, dear God, for your expertise and for saving us. And then we turned to the nurse as soon as he left and said, what the heck is a fist? I didn't hurt my hand, I hurt my brain. And the nurse really just simplified it. And she said, oh, you have a 50-gallon pipe going into a 5-gallon pipe in your brain, and it broke because you can't have 50 gallons going into 5. And we were like, ooh, thank you for that simplification. And then we had the trust in our experts. So we look at the experts in the technology rooms and all of that to be able to solve the problems that are out there. And then it's people like me that hopefully can simplify it as we move forward. Digital twins needs to be simplified. We do not need to recreate the wheel. We need to have common definitions. When my clients come to me, I have the 7th largest county in the United States. I come from Florida. And this county comes to me and says, everybody's talking about digital twin, what is it? And I said, well, your question should be fraternal, identical, conjoined. Everybody laughs, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But is it really? How are we using these digital twins? Why do you need it? What's going on with your digital twin? And by the way, just like a twin, a little baby, you have to nurture it. You have to develop it. So how are you planning to do that? Are you doing that internally with your own staff and your own organizations where you don't have that in-house expertise, or are you going to outsource that? If you're going to outsource it, who are you outsourcing it to? A small company, a big company, you're going to have 3 different companies coming to it. So these are things that you need to ask, because these buzzwords just keep coming up in our industry. I have over 30 years of experience in the industry. I'm an old lady, and I've seen it. So we had BIM, then we had smart cities, and now we have these digital twins. So I kind of started to put together graphs and charts to say, let's go back to where things are starting. If we're looking at smart cities are dealing with civic inclusion, our planning, our engineering, our construction processes, how to make them more efficient, how do we operate more efficiently, ultimately so we have data-driven performance. Then if you want to do another circle and you kind of want to BIM into that, well, what is BIM doing across that supply chain? Are we having smart sensors? What are those sensors saying? How are we designing our 3D models? Where are we placing those 3D models? Where is that interoperability? And then when you ultimately get to the digital twin, again, define it. What kind of cloud computing is needed? Where is your analytics? And are you using this for your traffic management department, your wastewater management department, to tell people where to park in your city? How are you using that so that benefits the industry or your constituents as a whole? I love this chart. It came from Trinity College in Dublin. And the reason I like it so much is it really simplifies things. It says, hey, let's look at the terrain. Now we're going to add buildings on top of it on layer 1. Layer 2 is that infrastructure. 3, we're starting to look at mobility for people, as well as your products and your services. 4 is your smart city. It's taking 0 through 3, and it's putting together that smart city initiative. That digital twin is where the simulation is happening, so that you can come back and inform your citizens, hey, park here. Traffic is backed up here. So how you use that and how you simplify it is ultimately how I think you can sell it and procure it. Because there's a lot of planning that needs to take place when we're working in digital twins. The need for it, the use case again, but I don't hear a lot of times people talk about security of that data. And I think we need to start focusing on that. BIM execution planning. We all talk about our BIM use cases. I've yet to hear anybody talk about the digital twin use case. So when I start looking at things for my clients, I actually hold the prime contract as a small business under $2 million. I'm the prime contract holder for the BIM VDC on-call consultant that has everything from BIM to GIS to digital twins and down for this county. And the reason I get chosen is because I say, let's define these uses. Let's look if you're going to use it for process optimization. Are you looking at it as part of your asset registry? And ultimately, how we looked at it was for risk management to help them start down their journey. And I really don't like to reinvent the wheel. So I am queen of Google, queen of simplification, because I don't understand half the time what all of these technology people are telling me. I have to Google what they're looking at, what are these terms, what are these abbreviations. So I look to see what's out there. When I Googled digital twin, did you know there was a digital twin periodic table? Really cool, Google it. You find 50 graphs, 50 different things about the digital twin periodic table. But I found 2 documents that I'm going to talk to you about today that I think might have value to you. The BSI Flex 260 came out this year. It was January 24th, 2022. And really it's organizing, creating, and managing your digital twins as it relates to your assets, your systems, and your processes. It has some good information that I'm going to just highlight for you. But my favorite thing and why I showcase this is it actually had a definition. And it's an ISO definition. So I strongly encourage you, if you don't remember anything else about my presentation, please look up the ISO definition for digital twin and use it in your organizations and within your own documentation. So it's talking about observable elements that you then tie into a digital representation. This document goes a little bit farther, and it says how you're looking at the simulation of that asset, whether they be virtual or whether they be physical, and how you're tying that into your planning processes, how you're using it for validation, and looking at how we're going back and forth between that observable element to that virtual as part of your digital twins. And different digital twins obviously need different levels of information management. Something I didn't know is there could be multiple digital twins. So do you think you can have a digital twin of your body? Well, if you have an Apple iPhone watch, you're starting to have that digital twin right now. It can monitor your oxidation, your temperature, your heart rate, your blood pressure. There's so much, how many steps I take. I hate that thing sometimes. I will literally stand there and go like this to make my Apple Watch make me log more steps, because I hate seeing my little circle not close. But that's an individual digital twin. It's a digital twin of just me. And they call that a discrete digital twin. But then they have connected digital twins. So let's raise your hand if you're a female and you've ever had an Apple Watch and you're above 30 years old, 30 to 50. We could have a whole bunch of us connected through our digital twins to see what we do as a generation or as a use group. Because our physical well-being is what we're tracking. So digital twins are coming about not because we had a technical group at Building Smart International that said so 10, 15 years ago. It's coming about because this is part of our everyday life. I right now can look at my house in Florida and say that my temperature inside my house is 85 degrees because it's really hot outside, and I can lower my temperature. I can look at my watch. They're digital representations. So people are expecting this in our buildings. And when we have to do this, now we have to look at information management. This is where I go to the doctors. I go to the BSI technical room and the experts that are here, and I say, okay, guys, I need you to help me put together these processes so I do have that easy button. Through information management, through the treatment of that data, the quality of our data, ultimately how we're using it. Information management is going to be really important as we look at the assets and the data quality through the data models and ultimately through a common language. Because if I call it blood pressure and you call it heart rate, we're not going to talk to each other if we ever want to connect our digital twins. Now, reality is, my owners all have their own unique language. I think of Building Smart as the ultimate Rosetta Stone. It's the translator. Because there we can take it from all different things and we can come back together and we're able to say, here's our common data language. When we're looking at digital twins and the practice and the sharing of that information, we've talked a lot about interoperability. But I encourage you to kind of read some of this documentation and see where those workflows are and how ultimately, why are we having a digital twin if we're not looking at the information to make better informed decisions? That's why my clients hire me and not all the big dogs in the room. That's why. It's not a secret. I just come in and I'm saying, I'm going to translate between HOK and AECOM. And I'm going to look at what they're saying, and this is the value that it has for you. This is how I can help you make better informed decisions. Another document that's out there has been out there since 2018, the Gemini Principles. A lot of people probably know it here in this room, but this is a great document that talks about developing a national twin. So in developing the national twin, it's going to help put together some of the information and some of the framework that's needed regarding the data requirements. What it's telling you is look at that purpose. Trust. You have to have security, you do have to have openness, but you have to have quality. And then when you're looking at the functionality of it, please, I need to know what can happen today. I believe in open, I believe in interoperability, I believe in Building Smart, and all the work that they do. But I also believe in Autodesk. I also believe in ArchiCAD. I believe in all of the wonderful software that is out there that help me today to get my clients to invest in the future of Building Smart. Because if I can't prove it today, and I can't show that it could potentially is possible on a really, really, really small scale, but gives them value, then how am I ever going to lead them to talk to a doctor to get the technical stuff that they need for that open common data environment? We all understand that that's a requirement. What this document says is that a digital twin should be for the general public good, should provide insight, should be open, and it should have clear ownership, governance, and regulations. How many digital twin presentations has anybody ever talked to you about the legal ramifications of digital twins? Well, if you work for any kind of government agency or large organization, that should be on the forefront of what you're talking about. We need to look at the accessibility, the accuracy of our data, how we're acquiring the data. That could mean who you procure it from. I'm on a $1 billion project right now in a convention center. It's a hotel, it's got a port, it's got all of this work. And where it broke was in the procurement. It's a design build project. The architect says it's not his responsibility. The contractor says, I bought you all to do anything that I wanted you to do forever. The trades are the ones that are bringing some of this stuff. They're like, we don't even remotely know what you're talking about. We'll do it because we want the next job, but it is beyond our comprehension level. How it's bought, how it's analyzed, to what level of granularity. This gives you some really good framework of where you can get started. Because a lot of my clients, big or small, and I work across the United States, think BIM sometimes is a digital twin. They'll buy it and say, hey, I'm requiring a digital deliverable, I'm requiring an IFC, and I'm requiring my models to be as modeled to as installed within an inch accuracy of tolerance, field tolerance. How is that not a digital twin? But it's not going back, it's not round tripping to connect, and how you're being able to use it for the future. So the first thing we need to do when we're going out and selling our services, we need to stop saying BIMs are digital twins, first and foremost, and we need to go back and having a common definition. When you're looking to adopt digital twins, whether it's for your organization or for your clients, please, how is it being financed? What are the legal ramifications in the framework that we need to be looking at? How are we leasing this information? How are we protecting this information? And how ultimately is it being connected? The Building Smart has a great positioning paper on digital twins. At the United States in the airport room, we have a work group that's specializing and focusing on this right now, but we didn't stop there. We went to see what industry is doing. What is the AAAE doing? What is the FAA requiring? How can we all work together in this effort? I'm going to give you a really quick digital twin use case example for my client. And when they so desperately wanted to be, you know, they're all submitting for Smart City Awards. They wanted to say they had a digital twin. And we just weren't there to have the digital twin in a common data environment maturity level. So we went really, really simple. This is a $1 billion convention center project. It has, as I mentioned before, it's part of the port. It's 1.2 million square feet, has a big hotel component, and obviously part of the convention center. On that, it's a design build. I have national recognized architects. I have big national, international contractors. I have a lot of technology. A lot of duplication on technology because they all bring their own systems. There happened to be a photo capture system that we were utilizing on site. As the owner's representative, what we have is construction monitoring and inspection as it relates to virtual design and construction compliance. We have traditional schedule review. I am also the data compliance agent. So because I knew we were doing photo capture, we took it to the next level. We were able to take their photo captures that were already on site. We tied it to the P6 schedule, again, part of my regular service line. What you see in green should be installed at that date and time. What that enabled us to do was to manage project risk. That's the use case. We monitored critical path in a visual way that our clients saw the physical environment and turned it around to say, here's what the virtual environment is, and now here's what it should be. Proactive risk assessment, being able to inform that schedule had immediate value to our client, and it got them excited to be able to talk more about digital twin. If I just would have went into them and said, hey, here's what I need to implement your digital twin effort, and talk to them about technology without showing them something, they wouldn't have been able to do it. They wouldn't have understood where we were trying to go. Assets to your digital twin. It's that virtual representation, the real-time data, you're looking at analytics, and it all talks about data interoperability. When you're moving it forward to our clients, the digital deliverability to the asset registry, we look at all the difference, we map their different data sources, we identify pain points. And we say the pain points between these organizations and these systems ultimately can go back to your digital twin and how we round trip it. I keep it simple for a reason. The biggest problem I think in our industry that we face today is how we can hire people, and the people that we are hiring, that they have this level of maturity. So we need to educate ourselves continually, but we also need to educate our clients and our workforce, because this is where we're going. The data standards and governance are important. The asset registry and data templates, it all builds upon itself. The digital asset data and onboarding. How many people have actually been in the field and done in-field data collection? Yeah, not a lot. In a room like this, every single one of us should go out there and see, because that's where the process breaks, right there. That's where it costs you a shitload, that's a technical term, lot of money. So you need to understand how you're getting the data into these systems, where these systems are connected before you even talk about digital twins. Now I get excited when you show me these things of, wow, this is potential. But then you need to ultimately be able to go back and map how our clients ultimately can get there in a language that's meant for them. This QR code does nothing more than gives you my email address, and I will send you these white papers that I just kind of highlighted in focus for you. So if you want to get the BS, the Flex document, if you want to get any of the digital build documentation, I created absolutely 0.0 of it, other than I read it. And I would encourage you to do the same, and I'm happy to just send that as a group email to whoever's interested in it. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was a great sort of, I think, yeah, bringing it back to the basics and really actually a lot of enthusiasm around the potential and showing how do we get there. And we're doing great on time. So I'm glad we got some seats up here, so we'll be able to get a panel discussion afterwards. Nos prochains présentateurs viennent de la France. Il s'agit de Vincent Keller, qui est responsable au département d'ingénierie numérique chez
responsible for digital engineering at Régis, and Edouard Chabanier, who is W head of standard regularization for the SNCF division. So we'll welcome both of them to the stage.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you, Guy.
Hello, everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
In Montréal. Bonjour à tous. Enchanté de vous rencontrer ici à
Welcome.
Montréal.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to meet you all.
Present with Edouard. It's the new challenge that the construction and mobility industry face, and why we think that in France it is deeply linked with the deployment and the implementation of openBIM and digital twins. First of all, let's introduce us a little. So I'm Vincent Keller, I'm from Aegis. I'm the head of digital engineering department for the rail domain in Aegis, and I am also the co-leader of the French national project, research project named BIM. We will present right after. On Edouard.
Yes, bonjour à tous. Merci de m'avoir accueilli chaleureusement à Montréal. Hello, everybody. I'm Edouard Chabanier. I'm Deputy Head of Standardization and Regulation Division at the SNCF Réseau, the French railway infrastructure owner. I'm currently leading the standardization domain from a BIM implementation program at SNCF Réseau.
So what we usually say in France, sorry, is that we have no oil, but we have many ideas. So about BIM, what we can say is that we have no regulation that mandate BIM on projects in France, but you have many stakeholders very fully involved in the deployment of BIM, and we have major projects that allow us this. In mind, we have several stakeholders, 62 stakeholders that gathered their efforts for deploying BIM for infrastructure. So we have major owners and asset managers. You can see some of the logo you may know. We have major contractors, international contractors. We have major international engineering groups. We have professional organization. We have public technical organization. We have universities. We have IT companies and software vendors. And we decided since 2014 to join our effort because we have the same idea that we could generate value by adopting common rules and common process to exchange information in project and to ensure data continuity. So in mind, we have 200 experts that work on those topics and to define those common rules. The main effort in work world of this group is to contribute on the definition of the BIM standards, the definition of data dictionaries, and we contributed a lot to the extension of the FC model for infrastructure. That's, we call it openBIM. The second crucial point on which mine has been working, it's about collaboration and how to ensure data continuity during the life cycle of assets, what we call open common data environment. But what are the benefits we focused on? It's benefits on the design phase, on the construction phase, on the operation phase, and the benefits, the data continuity between each phase. But so far, we have focused only on individual assets managed by an individual asset manager. Now, the mobility and construction industry is more and more conscious that they are a big part of the problem about sustainability, about climate change, about carbon emission, about biodiversity. But they are also more and more conscious that they are a great part of the solution. And to elaborate those solutions, we will need to cross-analyze things at a territory scale. So to analyze those things, we have to make information more accessible, more reliable, and more interoperable. And we have to manage it sufficiently and efficiently. To do so, we think that we have to define common rules to extend those information at a territory scale. That's why we are fully involved on the development of these common rules at this territory scale, and we think that the development of IFC is crucial. It's a crucial step. So what we are Edouard will present you. Before Edouard presents the development of IFC, this is the common position of mine. This is the use of standardized data model to model physical assets as designed, as built, or as maintained, allows to generate valuable digital assets which can be massively used by the numerous stakeholders during their life cycle with their preferred tool. Interoperability and data sustainability are key requirements from appointing parties to generate digital twins and to leverage them at a territory scale. And that's why this is the aim of openBIM, and specifically through the IFC model. So I hand over to Edouard.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. I will present you some technical stuff to see what is behind the digital twin. And we start with IFC 4.3. This is a decisive step toward openBIM and to the digital development. And IFC 4.3 objective, and particularly IFC Rail, is to provide openBIM solution from design up to operation and maintenance phases of an infrastructure projects. I will try to summarize five years of works in just a few minutes. And it's very difficult, so I give you only the point of a railway infrastructure owner. First of all, we started with the business requirements of all domains like track, energy, signaling, telecom, and we added a common domain to reuse some shared elements. It's okay. The objective of the IFC Rail Phase 1 was to deliver what's called a candidate standard, IFC 4.3 candidate standard. But before reaching this point, several documents harmonized the points of view of the different stakeholders, like the requirements analysis report with the uses cases. Then we got the data requirements report that synthesize all the railway objects and the properties, more than 2,000 properties for all railway objects. Then we got the conceptual model reports. We link the real object to the conceptual model. Then the mapping diagram, the model VM linked it to the real object and classes in the railway domains. Then we got the harmonized to ML, and finally the IFC doc is the candidate standard. Then we move to the phase 2 project from 2020 to 2022. And the aim of this phase was to implement IFC 4.3 final candidate standard and to start the ISO adoption process for an international standard. It was a common work because the goal was to assemble the outputs of all the other BSI rooms like roads, bridges, geotechnical, airports, and the importance of the implementation phase was very high because these tests have allowed us to validate IFC 4.3 schema and also demonstrate its viability. The challenge was to bring together the technical experts, like us, with the business experts domain, to validate the use of the IFC schema in a real project. For example, the French sector was actively involved in the whole organization of the project with more than 20 experts involved in over 200 meetings. And the implementation were based to the use cases specified by the business domain group in the first phase, like I said, in order to find a match between the test cases and the real use case all along the cycle of infrastructure project. We focused on how the candidate standard could fulfill the railway domain business requirements by experimenting implementation, first using on unit test, then on a full storyline. But what is a storyline? A storyline describes a real railway project in order to test all project configuration on a realistic data set from different stakeholders. Yes, phase 2 was also an opportunity to experiment some new IFC concept like the typical spatial structure breakdown. We address both linear and spatial decomposition to find out new use case for openBIM user, and in particular to integrate the specificity of linear infrastructure. But the key of this phase was the storylines in order to validate the project, all project test configuration. And the storyline was chosen according to the business cases that were important for the different stakeholders of the project. For example, for MIND and SNCF Réseau, we selected the deployment of the modern signing system, the URTMS, the substructure renewal, or the urban railway infrastructure system integration. I don't have a what's going? Sorry. Yes, I don't have time to describe all of this. Just a few words of the URTMS, the Open Traffic Management System. It's a multi-domain storyline because it addresses some telecom, signaling, and track with alignment elements. It's an interoperability system, not only at the European level, but also the worldwide one, that explains the interest of our colleagues from Italy and China. And we also address the design of a GSMR, which is the railway telecommunication system, and particularly the base stations. And another example, it was the urban rail infrastructure system integration storyline with more than 6 exchange scenarios which cover a multitude of domains like common spatial structure, cabling, and so on. To finish, the IFC 4.3 Rail Phase 2 success probably come from the work of multiple groups, railway stakeholders and software editors who contribute directly to the implementation test. And the most important fact is these actors have strong conviction about openBIM. It's the case of SNCF Réseau, my company. For us, the openBIM is a core value already implemented in our strategy. We are really convinced that the importance of openBIM, first, the interoperability, secondly, the openBIM solution ensure the independence from software editors, as we can use multiple data sources and open object. And thirdly, we are absolutely convinced of a scaled economy over the entire life cycle. And also thanks to the digital twin, its implementation will go beyond a simple digital double, as Cindy said, of a physical network. We are now in a crucial moment to our BIM program deployment, because we have to consolidate the role of BIM by applying IFC 4.3, and I let Vincent explain to you how we will apply IFC 4.3 now.
Thank you, Edouard. Actually, we have published IFC 4.3 schema, so it's time for implementation. And implementation is what we need to do to allow owners to specify the use of IFC 4.3 in their contracts, or what you have to do to help the industry to produce in IFC and to use open protocol. So we think to accelerate this implementation, we think we have to maintain the effort of collaboration between the stakeholders representing the owners, the industry. We need to, with the software vendors, and with the support of the technical service provided by Building Smart International. It is very important to maintain this effort, to prioritize the implementation regarding the business needs. And what are the business needs? The business needs are to manage implementation use cases by use cases, because in a real world we have to change the way people are working, so we have to manage it use cases by use cases, but we have to support this implementation through a sustainable process that can allow to go further. What is the situation now in infrastructure projects? Exchange requirements are not commonly specified by use cases. Moreover, few railway use cases are correctly supported in IFC by the existing tools. So what the railway stakeholders want is to accelerate implementation by software vendors by specifying commonly the exchange requirement and the modeling requirements, use cases per use cases. And the number of use cases or business cases are potentially unlimited. So that is the aim of the project launched last April within Building Smart International, named Applying IFC 4.3 for Rail. More specifically, mine, SNCF, and the other international stakeholders are experimenting a process and a tooling implemented by Building Smart International that can accelerate the implementation of use cases by software vendors. This process supports the definition of requirements from appointing parties and appointed parties regarding the ISO 19650. This process supports also the definition of rules addressing each requirements defined by the appointing parties, and it supports also the implementation, tests and validation. So the stakeholders of this project have prioritized three business cases that are not specific to the railway domain. Those business cases was presented this morning in the railway room, so you can review those presentation in replay. The first one is about model federation. The second one is about stationing along an alignment, so it's very specific to infrastructure. It has to be implemented regarding the best practices of the business. And the third one is about cabling for railway infrastructure, but it is also a common business case. That is very valuable regarding how to describe the networks in a territory. So to finish with, we think, as French stakeholders, that the implementation of the IFC is a key step towards describing the territories through a federation of digital twins, ensuring interoperability and data sustainability, and analyzing complex problems and solutions at a territory scale on the long term. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
If you have some questions, don't hesitate.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci Vincent, merci Edouard.
Thank you, Vincent.
Très
Thank you,
intéressant.
Edward.
Puis,
Very interesting.
je pense que c'est
And I think this is what's most striking is the amount of work that is done to facilitate and try to assure that everything works well.
said, you know, R&D, some good R&D, and I think this is a great case for some R&D. Our next presenters, to finish the session today, and we'll have some time for the panel discussion, is Cameron Schaefer from Transportation Data Acquisition Director at HDR, and Ken Roxas, who's CAD and BIM Section Lead for HDR Canada.
Thank you. All right, thank you for joining us. We're going to talk today about BIM and GIS. So this is a project-specific example, and I'm not going to say right out this is a digital twin that we're going to talk about, but I am going to say this is a digital twin journey that we are on, and kind of the beginnings of what we're exploring and some of the things that we're seeing. Because I think it can help to bring different insights to some of the opportunities we have today, but then also some of the challenges that we still face. So as mentioned, I'm Cameron Schaefer, and I've got Ken Roxas here, and we are with HDR. Quick little info about our company. Architecture, environmental, and construction services company, 11,000 employees worldwide, 200 offices, 16 key markets that we serve. We're going to talk at a very high level about our case study, which is the Ontario line, how we planned this project, how we implement BIM and digital delivery, how we translate that into our GIS hub, and then how we bring different information streams into our GIS hub. We're going to flip the script a little bit and look at the other way around, GIS to BIM, and then just kind of summarize with some of our overall findings and engagements of what we've learned to date. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken and let Ken tell you about our project.
Yep. So our project is the Ontario Line subway, which is in the city of Toronto with our client Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario. So if you look at the top right image there, you'll see that the alignment passes through the majority of downtown Toronto area. And the main goal of the project is to give an overall improvement to commuters in the area, as well as decongest the existing subway lines that cater to downtown Toronto. So the main scope of work is 16 kilometers of freestanding and underground subway with 15 proposed stations and maintenance and storage facility. Right. So now this is an ongoing project with the design, build, delivery type, and we at HDR and together with our partner companies, we pull talents and skills from our offices around the globe. Now we do have a long list of software tools, and in the middle of it all is Revit and Civil 3D for our design authoring, and we use a combination of ProjectWise, BIM 360, and SharePoint for our document management. We utilize Power BI for some of our automation tools and S3 for our digital twin. Right? Now, our models are mainly used for plan and drawing production, but then using Navisworks, we utilize our models for class detection and issue management and support our 4D pacing activities as well. 3D first approach is the basis of our program delivery services. And again, in the middle there is a combination of Revit for our architectural, structural, MVP services modeling, and Civil 3D for all of our infrastructure design. Now, particularly for civil structures and bridge modeling, we use a combination of Autodesk Inventor and InfraWorks. Now, all those models are incorporated with our data acquisition capabilities, particularly for survey, request maintenance management portal, and reality model creation. With our LiDAR point integration, we use a combination of Recap, QuickBase, and Bentley Context Capture. For document management, and particularly for project controls, dynamic linking of models to plans, and drawing production, we use a combination of ProjectWise, SharePoint, BIM 360, and Power BI. Now moving into 3D coordination, we utilize Autodesk Navisworks and BIM 360 model coordination, where we created a federated 3D model that we utilize for class detection and issue management. Now, for all of our design review and visualization in creating our rendered images, our video fly-throughs, and virtual reality, we use a combination of Enscape, Oculus, and 3ds Max. For construction phasing, especially for 4D construction phasing, we use a combination of Synchro and Autodesk Navisworks, while for 5D construction phasing, we use Assemble. Now, for our digital twin, we use Esri for its online web interface, where our design models are incorporated with our GIS repository and our reality capture data, and Cameron will talk about that later on. Now, when you do a model, a project in BIM, you need to understand your project needs and how models and information are intended to be used. In our case, we wanted our BIM models to be incorporated with GIS. And that means we need to set up our protocols early and adjust them as needed, and this is well documented within our BIM execution plan and CAD production manual. Now, we wanted our models and GIS integration to be cloud managed as well. So again, that's to make sure that our design teams has full integration and access to our digital models. Now, a well-defined digital design delivery at project inception is critical for data transparency, analysis, and review. Now, lastly, we established various automation tasks for this project, and one example here is identifying data transfer streams that require consistent and reliable outputs. Now, talking about automation for a BIM project, in this example here, we utilize ProjectWise environments and attributes and saved searches to identify the WG files that are currently living within ProjectWise. And what we do is we process that and transfer that into BIM 360 to be consumed for either Revit links or as a part of our federated 3D model. Now, another example here is where we use Power BI for model tracking and creating a visual dashboard for our common data environments. So lastly, here's a snapshot of our federated 3D model, which we created using Navisworks. So in this example here, we have around 800 plus design models, which is a combination of our vertical design and our horizontal design. What we do is we have this weekly update into BIM 360 dedicated folders, and we put this together so then the project team can access it. And again, these are source models that we use for plant production, but then we export them to Navisworks file versions for our federated 3D model. Now, lastly, these models are used for clash detection and 4D pacing in conjunction with reality mesh and LiDAR project data. And Cameron will talk about that later on, so I'll pass it back to you. Cameron?
Great, thank you, Ken.
Yep.
So a lot of common themes here today. Different information and different platforms, and how does it get utilized, and how does it get consumed, and how does it get organized, right? And the whole point of why we really wanted to walk through the digital delivery workflows and how we manage that information is because I think it's really important in what we've learned is structuring the data that you have at the beginning, setting up those protocols early, listening to what the client's needs are and the end states, and then defining how you're going to get there. So that's great. We've got all of this data. We've got 10 terabytes of point cloud information, 1,000 models. But as Cindy was talking about earlier, how do you distill this down for a client's perspective to what that means, right, and what they can do with it? Generally, with the clients, with the executive teams, with the stakeholders, you're not gonna set them up with a $12,000 BIM computer and have them look at this information. They need an easy, accessible, intuitive way to access this information. So from the beginning, we talked about this idea of our Ontario Line GIS Hub, and this is a tool to reflect progress through a single source of truth. So I like to refer to it as a window into everything that we're doing from the technical side, right? It's not a replication, it's a window to see through into information. So we defined that need at the beginning for a comprehensive ArcGIS Hub solution that would allow us to reflect our up-to-date design intent to a much wider audience. We've got well over 1,000 individuals using this tool. We needed, again, the ability to share single source of truth information across multiple different stakeholders, companies, time zones, countries, offices. And so this kind of started us on what I'll call the beginnings of our digital twin solution, right? This is a long-term project slated for 2028, and this is a journey that we are on with our client that we're looking to continually improve processes and bring the right technology to inform their needs and their use cases. So we started with all of that information, and the first step was taking those models that Ken talked about, right, those well over 800 models, and making those accessible and putting those geospatially in context. So that started our path through this journey of being able to connect our BIM 360 models into the Esri 3D scene environment and have a dynamic automated connection to where that information from our design environment is auto-populated within our Esri tool. So the same information that is informing our design is made available through the Esri web environment. We then took it a step further and said, what about our reality mesh data set? For those of you unfamiliar with what a reality mesh is, it is, okay, use your clicker, sorry. A reality mesh data set, there we go, perfect, is a photorealistic survey grade mesh that can give you various level of accuracy. In our case, we partnered with a vendor called Nearmap, who's an on-demand reality mesh provider that provides data that's roughly 11-inch horizontal, 16-inch vertical accurate. Reality meshes can be created up to centimeter accuracy as well. But this is a 20 square kilometer mesh of our project footprint that we're able to bring into this dynamic GIS viewer. Now, it's not just GIS that this mesh is helpful for. We can also integrate various different forms of this mesh, whether it's 3MX, OBJ, FBX, or even point cloud information, into our design applications like Civil 3D, Revit, and InfraWorks. So this becomes a key component of how we can better contextualize and understand the built world that we are needing to integrate into. So that was our next step, integrating this into the GIS Hub. This is a very large file, traditionally very hard for people to use, consume, and access. No longer is that the case. It's through nothing more than a web viewer now. So this is a core component of what we ultimately see being part of our digital twin solution. And again, as Cindy was talking about, I think she referred to them as layers, right, of the digital twin. There's maturity levels of digital twin, right? Different kind of ways of saying what that data is and how you progress. This is a core component of that very first layer, right? We then looked at, okay, how do we take it maybe even a step further? We have, again, over 10 terabytes of point cloud information, whether that be aerial, terrestrial, or mobile LiDAR. And there's not a person at our company who can process, manage, and run all of that LiDAR on a single desktop application, on a single desktop. So that's where we took that information, brought this into the same tool, and now we're able to take all those 10 terabytes of information from a point cloud perspective and distribute that again to thousands of individuals, right? More informed information and in more people's hands to make better informed decisions. So being able to look and contextualize, in this case up to centimeter accurate reality capture data, along with our proposed models, really helps our team to understand and have conversations around a 3D environment rather than always trying to do it in a 2D environment. And then lastly, one of the other tools within our 3D GIS hub are sectioning and leveling tools. So because this information is dynamically populated from BIM 360, it's not just the model that's populated, it's also the information within that model. So we can look through the use of Building Explorer at the different levels of the model, at the different construction phases within the model, and then various different attributes, turning those on and off, right? And we're putting these tools in the user's hands. We're not having to do this for our client or for our teams from the digital delivery perspective. This is an intuitive, easy tool that our teams are able to use. Now, different ways to slice and dice the models, right? And that various different content as well, as you can see here. So again, easy, accessible tools for the user to place those section cuts, to slice it in whatever way they want. And the unique thing about this is it's whatever information is turned on, whether that be the GIS information, the BIM models, the reality mesh, or even the point cloud. When you set up those section slices, it's all dynamic, right? It's gonna look at all of that information for you. Again, putting the power in the user's hands. So that whole workflow is very much BIM to GIS, and I think that's what gets a lot of attention and focus right now in our industry. But one small little use case of the other way around, GIS to BIM, I think this is just as interesting, right? And when we talk about open data and interoperability, that's a two-way thing, right? Not just a one-way. So this is just a quick example of where we were able to take city geodatabase information of existing utility information and then automatically populate from that GIS data source information directly into Civil 3D pipe networks. So we took information like utility type, diameter, material, and then automatically populated that within Civil 3D at assumed depths based off of utility types. Is that an as-built of existing utilities? No, absolutely not. But what it does let us do is start ahead, right? So we're not starting with 2D individual line strings that have to be individually modeled. We're using the intelligence that we already have from the GIS database and starting from there, bringing it into the BIM environment. And then so when we do go out and we pothole and we trench these utilities, we're then just updating the information from that 3D SU level D model that we have into something more accurate. So I just thought it's an interesting use case, and I think we're going to see more and more of this interoperability in ways to not only go from BIM to GIS, but GIS back to BIM. So when we look at the 3D integrations and this cross-platform collaboration, again, just to kind of summarize, these models are pushed dynamically from our BIM 360 design environment to the ArcGIS hub. And the automation of those steps through the BIM 360 cloud connector was a game changer for us. We weren't able to do that from day one. There's been new tools and developments, and timely data is trusted data, right? If you don't have accurate information in there, you run into issues very quickly, as we all know. So it provides this design detail and updates our stakeholders via nothing more than the web browser. And through the native file reading of multiple different file types, right? You're getting more and more into these open data standards. I really think this is starting to set the stage for various different digital twin initiatives. The immediate benefits we're seeing today with this tool are really based around an extremely reduced time spent on visualization. We're seeing, from what we can track from our usage, over 3 times more engagement and involvement in our BIM models. And then at the end of the day, what we all want, improved communication and better coordination between our project teams. So lastly, I think looking kind of more towards the future and what's next, we're currently piloting GeoBIM, which is kind of the next evolution of the Esri solution that has further integration with the BIM 360 platform. It's a single application for 2D and 3D content that can be managed all through, again, one very intuitive hub. What's interesting and unique about it is we are now able to leverage BIM 360 model viewing capabilities, which are much more detailed and have much more information within them in split screen. So you got GIS on one side, you got BIM 360 right on the other, all in one intuitive user interface. Nice little feature. And then we've also got issue management integration. So again, with a single source of truth, the issues live on BIM 360, but those can be populated from BIM 360 or from GIS, opening up the ways in which people can flag these issues, communicate these issues, and then ultimately report on those issues. So with that, thank you for giving us the time, and I guess we'll go into the questions here if we got some time.
Well, thank you very much, Cameron. Ken, you can have a seat. I'd like to invite Cindy, Edouard, Vincent, and Greg up on stage. I'm very happy. We have actually 15 minutes to ask questions. And if you want to ask questions, you can go on the Hopin platform. I will attempt to do this, or else, but I'll start with some questions that were sort of circulated. First off, thank you very much, everybody, for your presentations. I'll start with you, Cindy. I think you sort of had a very interesting take around the owner's role, and how do you sort of make it so that it's comprehensive for them. They have such a big role to play in creating demand, sustaining demand. And now that we're going from BIM to digital twins, so all these technologies, can you speak to sort of your journey with the Broward County for around how did you actually rationalize it for them, and to sort of touch on what you presented before?
Sure. Broward County is unique in that it does have 3 or 4 individuals that I would consider BIM experts. But that's 3 or 4 individuals that are in charge of a public works department, which is highways, roads, bridges, parks, port, airport. So when you start looking at all of the employees and individuals that you now start to have to coordinate, 3 isn't a lot. Mm-hmm. So the simplification is key. And being able to, I think, dumb it down and not take offense to that. I think sometimes people really get offended by the simplification of when I talk building smart or when I talk these standards. But if I don't understand it, there's no way in hell my clients understand it. So by simplifying it for the county, I think it enabled us to be competitive in a market where the big companies were using it as a competitive advantage. They can pay to be members of Building Smart. They pay thousands and thousands of dollars. They took that information as competitive advantage, and commercialized it for themselves. And then they were able to create these wonderful displays that you see, but then couldn't be implemented for the organization as a whole for the county. So we started small. We said still hire those big companies when you have your $100 million projects plus. And let's have them come in and tell us the latest and greatest. You don't have to pay to be there. Let them pay to be there and let them teach us. But always make sure you have someone who can standardize them and keep them grounded on the reality of what either the software can currently do today, and then ultimately how you can procure that software. Because procurement is where it breaks from an owner, and it also will break from a large contractor down, because you will buy it and sell it through your executives, but then when it comes to the people that are in the field, they don't even understand the tool that you thought you sold to the client to use. They're still using paper. I think one of the biggest things I heard yesterday was, let's get away from 2D. You're not getting away from 2D. It's not happening. That's what we need in the field. Sometimes it's not even safe for somebody to be climbing a ladder with their iPad next to them and lighting, or if you had an iPad on a wall and the building catches on fire. So you need to simplify, and you need to be able to then sell that in a consistent manner. And that's where I think my competitive advantage has been in going against the bigger companies and saying, I'm going to implement today, and then we're going to plan and strategize for your future based on business value.
Thanks, Cindy. And Greg, I'd be curious to hear you on sort of the LaGuardia Airport, and how did that sort of the implementation and bringing them. Was the client informed, and were they asking for digital tools and technologies and that, or was that something that HOK came to the table with?
Well, that particular project, got my audio right?
Can you hear?
So it's an interesting one because it's a P3, which is a PFI in some parts of the world, or you do several of those in Ontario, certainly I've been involved with. But so there was several requirements coming both from the operator, which is going to be a 30-year operator, and then from the Port Authority themselves, which is in New York, the entity that does roads and bridges, or bridges and airport facilities. So I think from our perspective, especially from an HOK perspective, we're looking at making sure we can streamline the process to making sure we're hitting our deliverables first, and then that can be actually very rudimentary stuff, if you will. But at the same time, because of the downstream requests, we're at least trying to set up the process in such a way that it's repeatable and will deliver at the end. Like I said before, actually, maybe I didn't mention this specifically, but I get involved in early planning and then I move away from these projects, so I'm less involved with the final delivery. So I can't speak to the details there, but that's basically the sort of conceptually how we would like it to work, I suppose, is the best way to say it.
Je vais me revirer vers Edouard et Vincent au niveau Edouard en tant que donneur d'ouvrage puis qui établit un.
Edouard, who is a contractor. Does the SNCF develop prerequisites in a precise way? Is it based on the delivery, on the digital delivery, or the needs? How did you work with your partners on the project?
SNCF is the client and driving requirements.
Yes, we have some repository, and we have to transpose the regulation. Currently, it's European regulation, the regulation that is mandatory, but to try to do the best effort to not apply many regulation. And I think it's not only the railway sector will do this, it's also the entire sector. And I think let's maybe Vincent speak on behalf of mine, because it's important to use some regulation, but adapt it to our business cases.
Yes, well, I think what is very important in France, especially in France, because you have no regulation about BIM deployment, is that the owners express some requirements in the contract, but the owners adapt their requirements to the maturity of the industry. So they try to manage the fact that several companies has not the same maturity in BIM, in the deployment of data management. All companies are not have not the same maturity in digitalization, so they have to manage this point, and they adapt their requirements, and they try to put some companies in the project that are able to make the other one gain in maturity, so that the industry gain in maturity. So in France, we are very intelligent owners that push the deployment at the industry scale by mixing stakeholders that are involved in one projects, some that are mature, some that are not mature, and people. Companies that are not mature can gain maturity.
So a deliberate, sort of very systematic approach to requiring the deliverables and digital deliverables, but also when setting up your team, being cognizant of the different maturity levels and trying to mix and match
and optimize.
And optimize. That's a very interesting. Cameron and Ken, around the Ontario line, can you speak to the role of Metrolinx in sort of driving the process? Did it come from the client, or was it this an HDR approach, and your role as owner rep in informing that decision to move towards sort of digital practices?
Yeah, no, great question. Working with Metrolinx has been great. I think they are a very progressive client. They're looking to enhance the ways in which they work, to get more insights, and looking for ways to do that. What's been great about this project is we are the technical advisor, so we are one with the client, right? We're looking to listen to what their needs are and what their use cases are, and bring effective solutions to solve those problems. So I think through building that relationship over the last 3 years, and you can start small with a lot of this kind of stuff, right? What is the simple problem that we need to tackle? Here's a way we can implement it, right? And those things progressively built. From the get-go, the only direct requirement was that there was a GIS hub of which can help facilitate information sharing, right? So this started very organic at a 2D level. And we it was 50-50 to answer your question, right? The client saw the value that it brought, and then we also had benefits for ourselves with how we do our work, right? And it helped inform how we do our design and how we communicate to our team and to our client. And so it's progressively grown through that relationship, right? And a lot of what we're doing now is starting to be adopted at the wider scale within the Metrolinx organization, for looking at how they can start to adopt some of this same kind of stuff on future programs as well.
Still have a couple of minutes. The timer's telling me we're almost out of time, but I'm trying to take the last 3 minutes. I guess I have a number of questions, but I'm going to pick on Cindy, Greg, and Cameron, because you guys are from the south of the border and want to understand the U.S.'s and the client's perception and their reception to openBIM principles.
So Broward County has required openBIM since 2013, and we currently only use it as an archivable deliverable. And some people are offended by that when I say that we're just archiving it, but it had immense value when they had to go back on a remodel recently and they had the older version of Revit that they couldn't be able to use. So an architect gave a proposal for over $80,000 to update that model into a current version. And I was like, well, they gave it to me as a change order, and they said, I looked at it very quickly, and I said, wait a minute, we have the IFC file. We don't need to do that for what you're doing. And it saved the county right there $80,000, and it was a 5-minute phone call. So sometimes it's, one of the things that the county has, that they set up very, very early was consensus-based digital deliverable requirements. So again, I did not recreate the wheel. I went to the standards that were currently out there, whether they be through AGC, AIA, obviously Building Smart. And then I invited in a public forum anybody and everyone that worked in the industry that wanted to come hear our standards and comment. We had over 100 organizations show up at that meeting. It was a 1-hour meeting that we then continued on in a progression that we ended up doing over 4 hours of review, that we had AECOM, again, HOK, all of these organizations that came in and said, yes, you know what, we can actually do that and deliver that as part of a basic service. So I think that open standards is very, very important, as all of the funding in the states anyway is coming in on that digital twin and under the smart city initiatives. And the way to capitalize on that is being able to use the models as that foundation through an open standard source and then tying it in ultimately into an open common data environment, which is this level and this funding, but again, you need to get this entire groundswell to buy in. And once we got all of the consultants to kind of buy in on that digital deliverable, it made it very easy for the county to manage because we normalized it. And once we normalized it, we could check it.
Greg, Cameron, what are your thoughts?
Just real quick, I mean, I think what we see is often several openBIM requirements along with native requirements. The level of, well, let's say, expertise on the building side to use the open data is probably, it's hard to know, but I don't think it's as high as it is in other places. I'm a little jealous with the infrastructure space and the requirements that are coming across there, I suppose I would say.
Yeah, and I guess what I would add is I think a lot of what we've seen is the both, right? Native and open as an option as some of the more progressive requirements. I don't think I've yet to see anything fully fully dictated and open. I think it's one of those things that it's always the show me first, right? Show me where it's been fully executed and done before, and then. So I think again, that foundational movement and working together and working within the industry to get to where we need to be. Once that is proven and we have more of these examples, I think it's our job as the consultants to help, again, listen to what the client's needs are, meet those measurable use cases, and do it in the most efficient and effective way possible.
Awesome. And Ken, you're our Canadian on the stage. What are your thoughts and you're seeing in the country currently in your work with HDR Canada?
Yeah, so my work with HDR, I'll be honest with you, it's more on the native file formats, at least right now. Now, there's some insertion of the open standards from time to time, right? But then it's within what's out of the box, what's native from the Bentley softwares or the Autodesk softwares primarily. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot. It's striking that there are sort of consolidations of platforms, and so a lot. I think this discussion around openBIM, and we can definitely learn from our French colleagues around sort of trying to really push the open agenda in Canada and the US. So that's time for it now. Thank you so much again, and I was really happy to be able to have this little discussion. So everybody, please thank our panelists, and thank you. Thank you. So we will be taking a break for till 1 o'clock for lunch. So it's on the 4th floor, le 4e étage. Pour le lunch, nous recommençons à 1h30. Merci beaucoup.